Supply Chain Management, Chapter 6. In Chapter 6, we talk about warehouse management. So, warehouses are this link between producers and consumers. It helps us to provide that desired level of customer service by giving us different geographical locations to store products in order for us to reach customers faster from then versus a centralized location. We have four cycles for products. First, we receive them at the warehouse, then we store them at the warehouse. Once a customer places an order, they are shipped and sent from our warehouse. This is one of those things where picking should happen before shipping. Um, when a customer places an order, we pick off the shelves. So, picking is a warehouse term for how we pull items off of shelves and out of storage in order to ship them to customers. So, why are warehouses important? Well, for multiple reasons. One is to achieve economies of scale. So, this is economies of scale in transportation, production, and purchasing. So we've discussed economies of scale in previous chapters where we talk about how when you produce mass quantities or you transport mass quantities, there's a lower cost per unit. So if it costs us $1 million to produce and we produce 10,000 items versus a million items, than the production per item. The same thing is with transportation, and where we've talked about how we don't want to be transporting air or partial shipments. And so by being able to transport and produce full shipments and then store them in warehouses. Another advantage is if we want to do quantity discounts by doing bulk purchasing. So if we do bulk purchasing or if we buy in advance, then we can get good discounts, but we need somewhere to store that inventory. We also want to maintain a source of supply to avoid stockouts. Okay? Support customer service policies. So a lot of that is really just to avoid stockouts and a risk of upsetting of our customers by not having items in stock. But another customer support policy can be that we provide 24-hour delivery service or 2-day guaranteed shipping. The only way that 2-day guaranteed shipping happens is through really great warehouse management to meet changing market conditions. And this is a variety of market conditions. One could be there's a holiday coming up and we need to have extra stock in anticipation of holiday purchases, or we need to have extra of specific stock in anticipation of holiday purchases. We could also have a new product launch coming out, and we want to make sure that when people hear about this new product that there's a wide availability. Okay? Overcome time and space differentials between producers and consumers. So we know that it takes 3 to 4 weeks to get a product to us from an overseas supplier, but our customers want that product in 2 days. We need to have enough on stock to make sure that we don't run out while we're waiting for the next shipment to come. So that time and space differential. We bring things from overseas and store them in warehouses to make them available for customers at the time that they want them. To accomplish less total cost logistics, so having centralized, having geographically dispersed warehouses where we can meet specific geographic regions without having to make sure that we are constantly um, flying things in or um, bringing things in by rail, and to support the just-in-time programs of supply management between our members and customers. So in order to support a just-in-time management program, we have lean inventory, which means that we produce inventory just in time or as a customer orders it. In order to make sure that we can produce inventory when a customer orders it, we need to make sure that we have a constant supply of materials needed for production. So we want our suppliers to be close to us. We might want linked warehousing. So our supplier warehouses are very close to us and we can get the items that we need on demand and then produce those items and get them to our customers. There are four main types of warehouses. So um, public warehousing, which is short-term rentals of space. So this is warehousing that is available to the public or available to anyone. And any company can contract for a short-term rental space. Most of those short-term contracts are about 30-day contracts. This is good for companies who don't want to buy their own warehouse or manage their own warehouse, companies who only need the extra warehouse space during certain times of the year to meet various market demand, um, or companies who are getting ready for a product launch. Contract warehousing is long-term lease of space. So instead of owning our own warehouse, we're going to rent a warehouse, but we're going to rent it for longer than 30 days or just a month or 2 months. We're going to rent it for an entire year and we're going to write a contract where we lease that space for an entire year. Then we have private warehousing, that's when the company owns the warehouse, and cross docks. Cross docks are temporary storage spaces, usually very large hallways between shipping and receiving. So when things come off of a truck, they are sorted and repackaged in this hallway and put on the next truck for shipping. We don't store any products if we use cross docks. We're just temporarily shifting materials in between those. So first we're going to talk about types of public warehouses. So we can have just general merchandise warehouses where we store all different kinds of warehouses. Refrigerated or cold warehouses, which are for groceries, or I know we've talked about in class about how vaccines have to be stored in at a very specific cold temperature or they are ruined. So those types of materials that have to be kept cold or frozen. Next, we have bonded warehouses, and special commodity warehouses, which are a special type of warehouse where we would keep commodities. These are usually when certain products have to transfer into government ownership in order to be sold, such as alcohol. So when alcohol comes into a state, it transfers into state ownership, and the state actually owns it rather than the company at that point. So that's a special commodity or a bonded warehouse where a government takes ownership of the activities. The nice thing is that these these specific types of warehouse can often avoid import or export taxes. Then we have household goods and furniture warehouses where individuals can store personal property. Another type of special commodity warehouse is a warehouse that stores things like agricultural products, um, raw materials, grains, wool, cotton, etc. And then bulk storage warehouses, which provide storage for large items or materials, such as like oil tanks or storing coal, sand, chemicals, different things. So things that come in very large bulk containers. When we're deciding whether or not we want to use a public warehouse, so remember the public warehouse is the short term warehouse that we contract just when we need it. We have to think about a variety of things. One, the advantage of short term is that we're conserving our capital. So we're not paying out money for warehouse space that we don't need all year round. So we're only paying for the warehouse space that we need. It helps us meet our peak requirements, whether that is a seasonal requirement, a holiday requirement, a product launch specific requirement, but it helps us meet that customer service need. It allows us to practice economies of scale with production and warehousing and bulk purchasing. It gives us time flexibility. We are not locked into having a warehouse to manage for a specific amount of time. We're only going to use it for the short period of time that we need it. We don't have property taxes. We may, however, have certain taxes depending on the state. We may have some business and storage taxes that are required for businesses that operate in states but own property in those states. Storage and handling costs might be lower. We know exactly what those costs are because we're being billed on a monthly basis. Another advantage is there might be an availability of specialized services because we're contracting that space, we're renting it for a short period of time. We can take advantage of the employees and the warehouse management that they already have on staff. And maybe one of the reasons we're contracting them is because of these specialized services that are available that we either can't afford or don't have enough need to have a full-time person for. Then one advantage and or disadvantage is space availability. So advantage, we have extra space when we need it. A disadvantage is that we might be limited to what's available to us for short-term rentals based on where we're located, the warehouses in our area, um, demand. There could be high demand where we can't get the space that we need, and then public warehousing would not be available to us even if it did have advantages for us. So then when private warehousing. So private warehousing is where we buy our own warehousing. So we have to think about a lot of different things versus the public warehousing. One, design flexibility. If we own our own warehouse, we can design it to be laid out any way that we want. We have access to robots, forklifts, shelving. We can set that up any way that we want. But we also have to think about the long-term costs of that and the costs that are required just from purchasing our own warehouse. Human resources. If we own our own warehouse, we have to staff it, which means that we're required to hire and manage a whole team of people to make sure that warehouse keeps running. There are tax benefits to owning property in a state. We pay property taxes if we own our own warehouse, but property taxes are deductible on our tax forms, and some states offer incentives in a tax benefit by saying that companies that come in and hire people in the state and provide jobs don't have to pay taxes or don't have to pay certain state taxes. This is a way that states use to incentivize companies to come and invest in their states. And then cross-docking. So cross-docking is cheaper, obviously, than a full warehouse because we're not storing anything. We don't need as much space. We move products quickly through the facility. Now, we do have to have, in order to utilize cross-docking, we have to make sure that our inventory is good for cross-docking. So if we were looking to, say, receive stuff from multiple suppliers, and then we would repackage. So I would have supplier 1, supplier 2, and supplier 3. I would take some items from each of those suppliers, repackage, and send that out to different geographical locations. Then cross-docking is perfect for my company. If that's not the way that my warehouse would be managed, then cross-docking would probably not work for me. So good strategy when our products are pre-picked for a customer order or the customer is nearby. We have very small shipments. We get products from multiple people that are then combined and reshifted into orders. So, or we're consolidating them for delivery to customers. So when we're receiving and then automatically sending that back out to other customers. Okay. And then the last, contract warehousing, and then we'll move on to the next video for the rest of the slides. So with contract warehousing, the advantages are that we don't have that big capital investment. We don't have to come up with the purchase price, the money, to buy an entire warehouse and to manage a warehouse and to staff a warehouse. The costs are lower than they are for public warehousing because we're a guaranteed customer for the life of the contract. So we don't have to pay premium costs for short-term rental. Our costs are fixed. So once we sign that contract, we already know what our monthly costs are for warehousing. There's no fluctuation in those costs from month to month, which allows us easier planning. And we have the advantage of any services that are provided by the contract warehouse's staff. So we also wouldn't be staffing the warehouse ourselves. We would utilize their staff and their services. Okay, so we'll continue chapter 6 in the next video.